The hum of the battlefield echoed through the abandoned ruins of the city. Smoke swirled in the air, mixing with the acrid stench of burning debris. Sergeant Alex Turner surveyed the wreckage, his mind struggling to process the chaos that had unfolded just hours earlier. The war had taken its toll on both sides, and now, amidst the devastation, he stood alone. His comrades, once his brothers in arms, were gone, wiped out in the firefight that had ravaged their position. Yet, as the dust settled, there was one more thing Alex had to deal with. Amid the rubble, he spotted something that shouldn't be there, a figure, barely visible in the shadow of a destroyed building. At first, he thought it was another body, a casualty of the ongoing conflict. But then, a small movement caught his eye. A soft, almost imperceptible sigh. It was a figure unlike any Alex had seen before. She was kneeling in the dirt, her vibrant green skin shimmering under the faint light. Her face, though marred with dirt and grime, still held an air of grace. She was an alien, and she was alive. Alex froze. In all the years he had spent on the front lines, he had never expected to find himself face to face with a survivor from the enemy's side. His orders were clear: eliminate the threat at all costs. But something about her, her quiet vulnerability, struck him hard. Her large, expressive eyes locked onto his, a mix of fear and confusion. She wasn't a soldier. She was just a girl. And, despite everything he had been taught, despite the hatred and distrust that filled his every instinct, Alex couldn't bring himself to leave her there. He had to help her. He knew it was dangerous. He knew it could cost him his life. But as he crouched down beside her, offering his hand to help her up, Alex couldn't ignore the undeniable feeling that something had changed. This alien, this stranger, wasn't his enemy. She had been abandoned, just like him, left behind by the chaos of war. The war had taken everything from him. But now, for the first time in what felt like forever, Alex saw someone who needed saving. He wasn't sure why he was doing it, but there was no turning back now. He extended his hand, watching her hesitate for a moment before her fingers brushed against his, the soft warmth of her touch a stark contrast to the coldness that surrounded them. She was afraid, but so was he. Together, they stood, a human soldier and an alien girl, both caught in a world they hadn't chosen, but one that now bound them together. And in that moment, amidst the smoldering ruins of a battlefield, Alex realized that he wasn't just saving her. She was saving him too. Alex and Zara moved quickly through the desolate landscape, their footsteps crunching in the dusty remnants of what had once been a thriving city. The air was thick with the smell of burnt metal and charred earth, the aftermath of a war that had torn through the galaxy like a storm. Alex glanced over at Zara, who was walking beside him, her movements cautious but determined. Despite the strange circumstances that had brought them together, they were now allies, two souls bound by the chaos of war, each looking for a way to survive. Zara, though still shaken by the events that had led her here, seemed to find comfort in the simple act of moving forward. Alex had never thought he'd be in a situation like this, helping an alien, but now that it had happened, it felt strangely right. They walked for hours, the sun setting on the horizon, casting long shadows across the wreckage. They had no destination, only a shared need to escape the chaos. Alex's mind raced as he thought of what lay ahead. His mission was clear: protect the human race, eliminate the alien threat. Yet here he was, protecting an alien, a member of the very species he was supposed to fight. But Zara wasn't like the others. She had been abandoned, left to die in a war that was not her own. And Alex had made a choice, one that felt more like fate than duty. "We need to find shelter," Alex said, his voice low. Zara nodded, her violet eyes scanning the surroundings. "There's an old outpost not far from here," she replied, her voice steady despite the uncertainty. "It's not much, but it will keep us safe for the night." They continued their trek, the light fading as the stars began to twinkle overhead. The outpost was little more than a crumbling structure, its walls covered in vines and overgrowth, a relic of a time long past. But it was a roof, and for now, that was all they needed. As Alex entered the building, he noticed Zara hesitating at the door. "What is it?" he asked, turning to her. Zara's gaze lingered on the doorway, her expression unreadable. "This place, it brings back memories," she said quietly. "Memories of my people before the war." Alex didn't press her for more. Instead, he simply nodded and moved inside, setting his gear down in a corner. He had no idea how long they would be here, but it didn't matter. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace, an odd comfort in the company of an alien who, despite everything, had shown him that survival was possible, even in the most unlikely of circumstances. The night was cold, but inside the outpost, they found warmth in their shared silence. They didn't need words to understand each other. Their bond, forged in the fires of war, was enough. Alex sat down, leaning against the wall, and glanced over at Zara, who was sitting across from him, her eyes closed, lost in thought. He couldn't help but wonder what she had been through, what had brought her to this point. But for now, he would give her the space she needed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new obstacles. But for tonight, they had found a moment of respite, a brief reprieve from the chaos that awaited them outside. As the wind howled through the cracks in the building, Alex closed his eyes, allowing himself to drift into a light sleep. His dreams were filled with flashes of the past, of battles fought and friends lost. But somewhere, buried deep within those dreams, was a flicker of hope. A hope that, maybe, just maybe, there was a future worth fighting for. As the first light of dawn filtered through the cracks in the walls of the old outpost, Alex woke, the faint chill in the air reminding him of the harsh reality outside. His eyes opened slowly, and for a moment, he forgot where he was. But then the events of the past day rushed back. Zara, the alien girl who had become his unexpected companion, the war, and the strange, unexplainable bond they had formed in such a short time. He pushed himself off the ground, feeling the weight of his exhaustion in his bones, but also the strange sense of calm that had settled over him. The first real sleep he had gotten in days had helped, but the uncertainty of their situation was never far from his mind. Zara was still asleep across the room, her chest rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. He studied her for a moment, the alien features of her face, her green skin, the sharpness of her features, seemingly peaceful in rest. She was no longer the cold, distant soldier he had first encountered. There was something vulnerable about her now, something human, despite her being from a distant world. Alex quietly stood up, stretching his stiff limbs before walking to the door. The world outside was still quiet, the only sound the distant howling of wind. The battlefield was far behind them now, but the scars it had left on the landscape were still fresh, a constant reminder of the destruction that had swept through everything. As he stepped outside, the cool breeze hit him, and for a moment, he closed his eyes, letting the air wash over him. There was no telling what the future held, but for now, they had survived. That was something, at least. He walked a few paces away from the building, surveying the land. The outpost had been abandoned for years, and there was no telling when the next patrol might come through. They needed to move, quickly and quietly. When he turned back toward the building, he saw Zara standing in the doorway, watching him. Her violet eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "We need to leave," Alex said, breaking the silence. Zara nodded. "I know," she replied, her voice steady, though there was a hint of something more in it. "I don't want to stay here either." They gathered their things, their movements efficient, almost instinctive. The bond between them had grown, unspoken but undeniable. Alex had saved her, yes, but she had saved him, too. Without her, he would have been alone in the chaos of war, adrift without a purpose. But with her, there was something worth fighting for. As they left the shelter of the outpost and made their way into the open, the air seemed heavier, the weight of their journey pressing down on them. The stars above were hidden behind the clouds, and the only light came from the faint glow of distant planets. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was comforting. In that silence, they both knew what the future would bring. Challenges, yes, but also the possibility of something more. Something they had both long given up hope of finding. "Where do we go now?" Zara asked, her voice soft. Alex looked ahead, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Wherever we can make it," he replied. And for the first time since the war had started, he wasn't sure if that was enough. But in that moment, with Zara beside him, he found something more important: hope. The journey stretched on, the silence between Alex and Zara growing more comfortable with each passing hour. The terrain around them was desolate, but there was something oddly peaceful about the emptiness. The ruins of the old city had given way to barren fields, where the wind swept across the land in gusts, carrying the scent of dust and distant storms. Alex had grown used to the harsh environment, but Zara seemed to take it in stride, moving with a calm assurance that surprised him. Despite everything that had happened, despite the war, she had an air of grace about her, as if she were more than just a survivor. She was a part of something much larger. As the day wore on, Alex noticed her becoming more distant, lost in thought. She had always been quiet, but now there was a heaviness to her silence, something he couldn't quite place. It was as if she were carrying a burden, one that she didn't know how to share. "Zara," Alex said, his voice breaking the stillness. "What's on your mind?" She didn't respond at first, and for a moment, Alex thought she might not answer at all. But then she spoke, her voice soft, as if weighing every word. "I never wanted this war," she said. "None of us did. But it came, and we had no choice but to fight. My people, they were just trying to survive." Alex looked at her, his gaze steady. He could see the pain in her eyes, the weight of guilt she carried, even though he knew it wasn't hers to bear. "War isn't something anyone chooses willingly," he said, his tone quiet but firm. "It's thrust upon us. We all do what we think is right, even when we're not sure." She met his gaze then, her violet eyes searching his face as if trying to understand him. "But you're human," she said, as if the words themselves held meaning she was still trying to comprehend. "You were never supposed to help me. You were supposed to fight." Alex let out a slow breath, his hands clenching around the straps of his pack. "I don't know why I helped you," he said honestly. "Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was something more. But I couldn't leave you to die. I couldn't just walk away." Zara looked away, her fingers tracing the edge of a broken piece of metal lying on the ground. "You could have," she murmured. "You could have walked away, and no one would have known. But I wouldn't have been able to live with myself," Alex replied, his voice quiet. The truth of it settled between them, a shared understanding that didn't need to be spoken any louder. They had both seen things in this war that would never leave them. They had both made choices they couldn't undo. But here they were, together, in a world that had been turned upside down by conflict. And in that moment, Alex realized that perhaps they weren't so different after all. They were both survivors. And for now, that was enough. The day began to slip into twilight, the fading light casting long shadows over the land. They had traveled far, but there was still more ahead of them. And no matter what came next, Alex knew they would face it together. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of purpose. It wasn't about the war anymore. It wasn't about the endless battles. It was about the promise they had made to each other, the promise to survive, no matter the odds. They walked on in silence, the distant hum of the wind filling the space between them. And as the stars began to twinkle overhead, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The next few days passed in a blur. Alex and Zara had settled into a rhythm, moving quietly through the vast, barren landscape, always on alert, but with an unspoken understanding between them. They didn't need to talk much anymore. Their survival depended on each other, and that knowledge was enough to keep them going. Every step they took away from the ruins of the city felt like a step closer to something unknown, but also something they both needed, a future that wasn't defined by war and destruction. As they walked, Alex found himself reflecting on the strange bond that had formed between them. He had never imagined he would be in this position, helping an alien, someone who had been his enemy only days before. And yet, here they were, two people, no, two beings, bound together by circumstance, and perhaps something more. Zara had told him little about her people, the Zirans, but what she had shared painted a picture of a race that, despite their advanced technology and power, had been caught in the crossfire of a war they never asked for. She was one of the last survivors of her kind, her world ravaged by conflict, her people scattered across the galaxy. The weight of that history was something Alex couldn't fully comprehend, but he could see it in her eyes, the burden of survival, the guilt of knowing that her people's actions had led to their downfall. And yet, despite it all, she still carried herself with a quiet strength, a determination that Alex found both inspiring and humbling. How much farther? Zara's voice broke through his thoughts. She had stopped a few paces ahead of him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Alex glanced up. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the empty fields. "Not far," he said, adjusting the strap of his pack. "There's a settlement just ahead. We should be able to rest for the night." Zara nodded, but there was a certain weariness in her movement, a fatigue that Alex knew was more than just physical. She was tired, not just from the journey, but from the weight of everything she had lost. Alex didn't blame her. He could feel it too, the crushing weight of a world that had been torn apart by war, the uncertainty of what would come next. But for now, they had each other. They had survived this far, and that was something. As they approached the settlement, a small cluster of buildings barely visible against the fading light, Alex felt a sense of cautious optimism. It wasn't much, but it was something. The settlement, like most in this part of the galaxy, was a hodgepodge of different cultures, a melting pot of species who had all been displaced by the ongoing war. It wasn't a place of luxury, but it was safe, at least for now. As they entered the settlement, the bustling activity around them was a welcome distraction from the harsh quiet of the wilderness. People, human and alien alike, moved about, tending to their daily tasks, speaking in a variety of languages that Alex couldn't quite understand. It was strange, seeing so many different faces in one place, all united by the shared experience of survival. Zara's eyes darted nervously around the settlement, her posture tense, but Alex could see the faintest trace of relief on her face. "We'll be fine here," he reassured her, his voice steady. Zara didn't respond, but her eyes softened slightly as she met his gaze. It was the first time she had let her guard down, even if just a little. As they found a quiet corner to rest for the night, Alex sat down beside her, his body exhausted but his mind still racing. There was so much he wanted to ask her, so many questions that lingered, unanswered. But for now, he kept quiet, giving her the space she needed. They had made it this far, together, and that was enough. As the stars began to fill the sky above them, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. They were on the edge of something new, something neither of them could predict. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of hope, not just for survival, but for something more, for the possibility of a future beyond the war. The following morning, the sun rose slowly over the settlement, casting long shadows across the dusty streets. The peaceful hum of daily life was a stark contrast to the chaos Alex had grown accustomed to. For the first time in a long while, the tension that had gripped him for so long began to ease. The people here, though displaced and struggling, seemed to have found a sense of normalcy in the midst of all the destruction. As Alex walked through the settlement, his steps light and deliberate, he couldn't help but notice how much things had changed since his arrival. His purpose here had never been clear, survival had been the only thing on his mind. But now, as he looked at the faces around him, he felt something new, hope. The sight of children playing in the streets, of families gathering together, was a reminder of what they were all fighting for. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about rebuilding, about finding a way to live again. He glanced over at Zara, who walked beside him, her eyes scanning the people around them. Though she had been quiet since they arrived, there was a shift in her demeanor. She was still guarded, but there was something softer in the way she held herself, as if the weight of the world had lifted, even if just a little. She had been through so much, and yet, she was still here. She was still fighting. And for the first time, Alex saw her as more than just a survivor. He saw her as someone with a future. "How are you holding up?" he asked, breaking the silence between them. Zara didn't look at him immediately. She kept her gaze fixed on the path ahead, but there was a small pause before she answered. "I'm adjusting," she said quietly. "It's strange, being in a place like this. It's not what I'm used to, but I think I'm starting to understand what it means to survive." Alex nodded, though he knew she wasn't just talking about surviving physically. There was something deeper there, a struggle that ran far beyond the battlefield. It was the struggle to find a place, to find meaning, in a world that had been torn apart. "You're not alone in this," Alex said, his voice steady. "We're all just trying to make sense of it. And we'll make it through, together." Zara didn't respond, but the faintest hint of a smile tugged at the corner of her lips. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was there. And for Alex, it was enough. They continued walking, the settlement bustling around them. But there was a new sense of purpose in their steps. As they moved through the marketplace, Alex noticed a man selling food, simple rations, but it was better than nothing. He turned to Zara, about to suggest they stop when a sudden commotion broke out a few feet away. A group of people had gathered around, their voices rising in anger. Alex instinctively stepped closer to Zara, his hand resting on the hilt of his sidearm, but before he could react, a woman's voice cut through the noise. "Enough!" she shouted, her tone commanding. The crowd parted, revealing an older woman, her face stern but kind. She stepped forward, her eyes locking onto Alex and Zara. "You too. I know what you've been through," she said, her voice softening as she approached them. "But here, we help each other. We survive together." Her words hung in the air, a reminder of what they had come here for. As Alex looked at the woman, he realized she wasn't just speaking to them. She was speaking to everyone in the settlement. She had seen the worst of what the world had to offer, but she still believed in the power of community, in the strength that could be found in unity. It was a lesson Alex hadn't realized he needed to hear. Zara stepped forward then, her voice quiet but firm. "We're not here to cause trouble," she said. "We just need a place to rest. A safe place." The woman's gaze softened, and she nodded. "Then you've come to the right place. Rest for now, but know this. If you stay, you'll fight for this community. We stand together, or we fall apart." Alex nodded, his resolve firming. For the first time since the war had begun, he felt like he had found something worth fighting for, something more than survival. It was something more precious than he could have ever imagined. As they walked toward the shelter the woman had pointed them to, Alex's mind was clear. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of optimism. They had a chance, not just to survive, but to rebuild. And that was something worth fighting for. The days that followed in the settlement brought a new sense of routine for Alex and Zara. The initial tension that had existed between them, a byproduct of their unlikely partnership, began to fade. They worked together, side by side, performing small tasks to contribute to the community, Alex helping with physical labor and security, while Zara took on roles that suited her, like managing supplies and offering assistance where her knowledge of alien technologies could help. Despite the challenges of their situation, there was a quiet comfort in the small things. The sound of children playing in the streets, the smell of freshly baked bread wafting from a nearby market stall, and the occasional smile exchanged between people who had once been strangers now united by a common struggle. The world outside remained uncertain, a constant reminder that the war was never truly over. But for the first time in a long while, Alex felt like he could breathe. His nights were quieter now, the weight of the endless battle giving way to the promise of something more, something worth protecting. It was during one of these quiet nights that Zara approached him. She had been distant, but her presence beside him now felt different, less guarded, as if she were beginning to trust him. "Alex," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about what you said the other day, about fighting for something more." He turned to face her, his expression softening. "You don't have to fight if you don't want to. I know this isn't your battle, but I believe in what we're trying to build here. We all have our reasons for being here, but in the end, it's about more than just survival. It's about hope." Zara's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw the vulnerability she had kept hidden for so long. "I've never known hope," she said quietly. "My people, we were always taught that survival was the only thing that mattered, that we had to fight to survive, no matter the cost. But here, with you, I'm starting to see that there's something more, something I never allowed myself to believe in." Her words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Alex didn't need to say anything. He could see it in her eyes, the change that was happening within her. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was becoming something more. And so was he. They were both learning what it meant to truly live again. "You've made a difference," Alex said finally, his voice low but steady. "Not just to me, but to everyone here. You've shown them that we don't have to give up, that we can keep going, no matter how hard it gets." Zara's lips parted, as if to speak, but then she smiled. Just a small, fleeting expression, but enough to make Alex's heart beat faster. It wasn't much, but it was a start. In the quiet of the settlement, with the stars shining brightly overhead, they sat together, side by side. The future was still uncertain, and there were no promises of what would come next. But for the first time in a long time, Alex felt like they were on the right path. The war had taken so much from them, but it had also brought them together. And in that, There was a kind of peace, a peace that had nothing to do with the absence of conflict, but everything to do with the shared understanding that they weren't alone anymore. As the night stretched on, they sat in comfortable silence, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together. They had found something worth fighting for, something worth protecting. And for the first time in what felt like forever, they both had hope. Days passed, and the routine in the settlement became a part of life for both Alex and Zara. The threat of the outside world was always present, but it seemed less immediate here. They had found a temporary sense of peace, a quiet place where they could rebuild, at least for now. People came and went, traveling through the settlement, bringing news from other regions. But for the first time, Alex didn't feel the constant pressure of battle on his shoulders. He had a purpose now, helping Zara, helping the community, and that gave him a sense of direction he hadn't known in a long time. But despite the calm, Alex knew that the war hadn't ended. It was only on pause, and they couldn't afford to forget that. One evening, as the sun set and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Alex and Zara sat together on a small balcony that overlooked the settlement. The wind was gentle, carrying the earthy scent of the land. "We've come a long way," Alex said, his voice low, though there was a quiet pride in it. Zara nodded, her gaze soft as she looked out over the horizon. "We have," she agreed. "But I still don't know where we go from here. What happens after all this?" Alex had been thinking about that a lot lately. He had always lived his life with the understanding that there was a next mission, a next fight, a next objective. But now, with the war no longer in the forefront of his mind, the future seemed both uncertain and full of possibilities. "I don't know either," he admitted. "But I think we make it up as we go, one step at a time." Zara turned her head to look at him, her violet eyes reflecting the light of the stars. "That's a strange way to live," she said, almost with a hint of amusement in her voice. "But I suppose you're right. It's all we can do now." Alex smiled faintly, his gaze meeting hers. He had always been the soldier, trained for missions, for plans, for action. But this was different. This was about survival, about finding something to hold on to in the chaos. "I think, for once, I'm okay with not having all the answers," he said, his tone steady. Zara didn't respond immediately. She seemed to be lost in thought, her fingers tracing the edge of the railing as if she were pondering something deeply. After a long moment, she spoke again, her voice quiet but sincere. "You've changed," she said. Alex looked at her, surprised by the statement. "What do you mean?" he asked. "You're not the same man who first helped me," she explained. "The man who only saw survival, only saw the fight. I see something else in you now. Something more." Alex's chest tightened at her words, but he didn't know how to respond. He wasn't sure he fully understood the change she was talking about, but he knew it was true. He had changed. The experiences they had shared, the struggles they had faced together, had opened something in him that he didn't know was there. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. "Maybe I've learned what it means to truly live," he said softly, almost to himself. "Maybe it's about finding something worth fighting for, even when it seems like there's nothing left." Zara was silent for a moment, then nodded. "Maybe," she said. "But whatever it is, I think we're both finding it now. Together." The weight of her words settled between them, a quiet understanding. They had both lost so much, but they had also found something worth fighting for, something worth holding on to. For the first time in a long time, Alex felt at peace with that. They didn't need to have all the answers. They didn't need to know what the future held. What mattered was that they were here, together, with the possibility of a future ahead of them. The stars continued to twinkle above, silent witnesses to the quiet promise that had been made between them. And as the night stretched on, Alex felt a warmth inside him that had nothing to do with the heat of the day or the cold of the night. It was the warmth of hope, and it was enough. As weeks passed, Alex and Zara had settled into their new routine. The settlement had become more than just a place of survival for them. It had become a home. They had learned to live side by side with the other inhabitants, sharing stories, skills, and resources. The community was small, but it was tight-knit, a place where everyone understood the importance of helping each other, no matter their backgrounds or the scars they carried from the war. Despite the peace they had found here, the outside world was never far from their thoughts. Every now and then, a group of travelers would pass through, carrying news of ongoing battles, new threats, or rumors of distant planets in turmoil. But inside the settlement, Alex and Zara found solace in the simple, everyday moments, working together, learning from each other, and, in a way, healing. One afternoon, as Alex was helping to rebuild a small structure near the edge of the settlement, he caught sight of Zara walking toward him. She was carrying a small bundle in her arms, and her expression was thoughtful, almost distant. "Hey, Zara," Alex called out, wiping his hands on his pants as he turned to face her. She smiled softly, but there was a hint of something more in her eyes, something Alex hadn't seen in a while. "I have something to show you," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "What's that?" Alex asked, his curiosity piqued. Zara held out the bundle, revealing a small, delicate plant with bright blue flowers. It was unlike anything Alex had seen before. The petals shimmered in the light, and the plant seemed to glow with an almost ethereal quality. "It's a plant from my homeworld," she explained, her fingers gently brushing the flowers. "It's called a laris flower. It's rare, and it only blooms under specific conditions, like the ones we have here." Alex couldn't help but be fascinated by the plant. It was a symbol of Zara's people, of her past, and yet, it was also a symbol of their future. "It's beautiful," he said, admiring the plant. "Why are you showing it to me?" Zara smiled, the faintest hint of pride in her eyes. "Because it's the first thing I've been able to grow since we arrived. It's small, but it's something. It reminds me that there's still life to be found, even in the darkest places." Alex nodded, understanding the significance. In a way, the laris flower was more than just a plant. It was a symbol of hope, of resilience. It was a sign that, despite everything they had been through, there was still beauty in the world, still the potential for growth. "You've come a long way," Alex said quietly, his gaze meeting hers. Zara didn't respond immediately. She simply stood there, looking at the flower in her hands, her thoughts seemingly far away. After a long moment, she spoke again, her voice soft but resolute. "We all have," she said. "But I think, maybe, we've found something worth fighting for. Something worth protecting." Alex didn't say anything at first. He simply stood beside her, watching as the wind gently blew through the flowers, the petals swaying with the rhythm of the breeze. It was a peaceful moment, one that felt as if time had momentarily slowed down. For the first time, Alex realized that Zara wasn't just surviving, she was living. And for the first time in a long time, he could say the same for himself. The future was still uncertain. The war was still raging out there, in the far reaches of the galaxy. But here, in this small corner of the universe, Alex and Zara had found something precious, a future that they could shape together. And for that, they would continue to fight, not for survival, but for the chance to live. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the settlement, Alex felt a sense of peace he had never known before. They were no longer just fighting to survive, they were fighting for something more. And that made all the difference.